Hey y'all, welcome back to Feasting on the Word with D.G. Hamblin. I am D.G. Hamblin, and I'm sorry it's been a little while since I was on here. I had to make a mad dash to Utah and grab my son's car and drive it back out here. He's getting married in a couple of weeks, and for some reason they don't want to drive two cars across country. Anyway, oh man. I also had COVID again, but I feel well enough now. I've had plenty of time to study, and I've got a couple of things for you. So, I want to talk about something that I discovered. I'm sure I'm not the first or the only one, but this was new to me in Alma 36, and we're going to tie this into some other stuff. And at the end, I hope you find what I am going to share with you really interesting because it interests me. Now, so anyway, just stick around. Okay, so I was reading, going back over the reading in Alma 36, and as I was doing so, I noticed a footnote for verse 18 that referenced Jonah 2 verse 2. Oh, that's interesting. Why are they referring to the story of Jonah here? And so I went back and looked at the story again with a different lens. And what do we find? I found some correlation between the story we have here in Alma and the story of Jonah. And then, of course, that leads to a direct correlation, I think, of Christ. Okay, so in Alma 36, Alma the younger here is talking to his son Helaman. And he's giving him, some advice and words of wisdom and some doctrinal things. And look, there's some more really cool stuff than what I'm going to talk about today. And maybe we'll go over that again if I have time to shoot a video. And if not, it's still here. We'll get back around to it eventually. But so one of the things he talks about, I've got to wear my glasses now most of the time. Sorry. So as he's talking to him, he was relating to his son the story of his conversion, how he was not a great member of the church. I can relate to that somewhat. I was probably not as bad as Alma the younger, but I've had my own kind of prodigal journey. Anyway, so he's let's start in about verse 6. He says he was going about with the sons of Mosiah, seeking to destroy the church of God. But behold, God sent his holy angel to stop us by the way. And so this angel appears and speaks with a voice of thunder. The whole earth did tremble. They fell to the earth, for the fear of the Lord came upon us. And then the voice says to him, Arise, and tells Alma the younger, If thou wilt of thyself be destroyed, seek no more to destroy the church of God. And this really kind of hits Alma the younger. And he goes on to say about halfway down verse 11, I was struck with such great fear and amazement, lest perhaps I should be destroyed, that I fell to the earth, and I did hear no more. But I was racked with eternal torment, for my soul was harrowed up to the greatest degree, and racked with all my sins. Yea, I did remember all my sins and iniquities. Now, you're probably familiar with the story. How long was he in this state of kind of an unconscious state? His body is laying there. It goes on to tell us in verse 16, And now for 3 days and for 3 nights I was racked, even with the pains of a damned soul. And it came to pass that As I was thus racked with torment, while I was harrowed up by the memory of many sins, behold, I remembered also to have heard my father prophesy unto the people concerning the coming of one Jesus Christ, a Son of God, to atone for the sins of the world. So far, what we have is Alma in a state where he is unconscious. I think he kind of wishes that he could have died, maybe, where his soul is really being harrowed up, as he put it, for 3 days and for 3 nights. And if you know the story of Jonah, you know that he was in the belly of the whale. You can call it great fish, whatever you want to call, for 3 days and 3 nights. And then we read that Jonah prayed to God. And I wonder if his prayer wasn't something similar to what Alma the Younger prays here. Because he says, "Now as my mind caught hold upon this thought, I cried within my heart, O Jesus, thou Son of God, have mercy on me, who am in the gall of bitterness, and am encircled about by the everlasting chains of death." Now that's interesting imagery right there. He's in the gall of bitterness. He's encircled about by the everlasting chains of death. This imagery of being in prison. Now, you may not know where I'm going with that specific imagery. Hang on. I'm going to explain that. We're going to go look at Jonah here in just a second. And then he says, "Behold, when I thought this, I could remember my pains no more. Yea, I was harrowed up by the memory of my sins no more. And oh, what joy and what marvelous light I did behold. Yea, my soul was filled with joy as exceeding as was my pain." He goes on to describe a little more how bitter was the pain and how sweet was the joy. Okay. And then we know he and the sons of Mosiah went and became great missionaries and had no desire other than to just go and preach and spread the gospel and try to bring back many lost souls. And they went to the Lamanites. They went all over. Okay. Now, some similarities here that I'm going to point out as we get over into Jonah. There's him going about to destroy the church of God. And perhaps Jonah wasn't trying to destroy the church, except that by being rebellious and not preaching as he was told to do, he's not building up the church, right? So perhaps you could say he's trying to thwart the work of the Lord, so maybe in a way he was trying to destroy it. And we'll talk a little bit about his mindset and why he did what he did in a minute. Okay. And then we have this imagery. We have here these chains. He's encircled about by these chains, so kind of a prison or being held captive kind of image. Okay, let's go ahead and go on over to Jonah. Like we said a second ago, we know that Alma became a great missionary. Jonah teaches people, not really because he wanted to. Okay, so in Jonah, and if you have your scriptures, man, grab them and just kind of follow along. So, okay, the basic story of Jonah, and then we'll get into some details here, because we don't have to read the whole thing. Although it is a really short book. I mean, the whole book is only, 4 chapters, but it's like 3 whole pages, 2 whole pages there, a half a page, and less than half a page. So it's an easy read. So Jonah is told by the Lord to go to Nineveh and to preach, and to preach the gospel to them, and he doesn't want to go. So the people in Nineveh were the arch enemy of Jonah's people, the arch enemy of the Hebrews, and they I try to think of what this would be like. I don't know if you know how much distaste traditionally over the years the Germans and Russians have had for each other, but it would be something similar to that. Or let's say right after the Civil War, if somebody from the South had been told to go to New York City and to preach and convert the whole city, there was not any love lost between these groups of people. So Jonah doesn't want to do it. He knows they'll be converted. The Lord has told him to go do it. The Lord tells you to do it, then that's what's going to happen. So he's like, I'm not going to Nineveh. So he gets on a ship, and instead of going to Nineveh, I think he's wanting to go to Tarshish. And then, of course, the Lord's not going to have that, so sends a storm. The sailors and the people there on the ship, okay, what's going on? Who has made their God angry? And so they go and they ask people. I think they're maybe even going to cast lots. But Jonah's like, look, this is my fault. Jehovah is my God, and he's told me to do something, and I made him mad. And so the fear of the Lord comes on these people. They try to row to shore. He says, you're going to have to throw me overboard. They don't want to. They try to lighten the ship. They try all these things. Finally, they throw him overboard. And we can read in Jonah 1, verse 15. So they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. And then this interesting thing kind of happens. I just have to mention this. The men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice unto the Lord and made vows. So these people had not been followers of Jehovah, but it sounds like they were very quickly converted. Okay, so he's been thrown overboard. Jonah has been. And verse 17 reads, now the Lord had I got glasses on. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. And at 3 days and 3 nights, of course, is the same as we had in the story of Alma the Younger. He was harrowed up in this state for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, it says here he was in the belly of the fish. And then we see some contradictory thing here in chapter 2. So then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly. And then verse 2 says, and said, so this is supposed to be what Jonah said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice. So he says that he is praying out of the belly of hell. And this word we have here as hell is the Hebrew word Sheol. What is Sheol? Sheol is the unknown place. It's the place where the Hebrews believed that you went after you died. This is the place your spirit went to await the resurrection. It was a holding place. And, interestingly enough, it was divided up into 2 general categories. There was one part which was a park-like paradise where those pious souls, or those who had been righteous, would go to await. And then there was another part which is often described as a pit, or as a hole, as this dark, dark place. And that is where the souls of those who have been unrighteous. And it sounds like this is the place where Jonah is. And I'll tell you why. We'll read here. Let's read on. I'm going to tell you right up front. Often I've found people believe that Jonah was somehow alive in the belly of the whale. And that's not what we are told here. I believe he was dead. Okay, so he's praying out of the belly of hell, or out of Sheol. Oh yeah, the contradiction there. His body is in the whale. His spirit is in Sheol. That's one reason why I believe he was dead. Okay, it says, "For thou hadst cast me into the deep, into the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. And I said, I am cast out of thy sight, yet will I look again toward thy holy temple." Verse 5, "The waters compassed me about, even to the soul." And this phrase, "to the soul," means to death, to the point of death. So he drowns. "The depth closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped around my head, about my head." So he is weighed. He's drowned. Okay. And then we have this other description. So I believe that the verse 5 here is talking about the state of his body. And then 6 is his spirit. "I went down to the bottoms of the mountains," or to the foundations of the mountains. "The earth with her bars was about me forever." So another translation for that would be that the earth closed her bars behind me forever. So we have this imagery of imprisonment, just as we had read in Alma, with the being encircled about by the chains. So we have this imagery of imprisonment in the spirit prison. Yes, and we'll talk about that more again in a minute, because it's going to tie into Jesus Christ. So he says, "Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption." So from corruption means from death. So he says here that the Lord says, "Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord my God." So the Lord brought him back from death, brought him back to life. Not resurrected with a glorified body, but brought him back to life. "When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee, into thine holy temple." And the next couple of verses really are not important. And then it says in verse 10, "And the Lord spake unto the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land." Okay. So, can you see the similarities in the two stories? I thought that was really interesting. I had never seen those similarities before. Now, there are some differences. Jonah goes and prophesies to the people in Nineveh. They repent, and he's not happy. Alma the younger goes and preaches to people, and they repent, and he is thrilled. there's more stuff we could get into with Jonah that's really cool there at the end of that book. We'll save it for another time. So how does this relate to Jesus Christ? Well, Christ was once asked for a sign. So if you'll open to Matthew chapter 12, and in verse 38, there are some scribes and Pharisees. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now, he says 3 days and 3 nights. That's not important to what we're going to talk about here so much, but I do believe that since he said it, that he was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, buried before he was resurrected. What does that mean? That means that we have to recalculate on what day Jesus was crucified. We typically think of it as being on Friday, and I'm going to tell you, it just doesn't work out. But again, a whole other thing for another time, because I can show you how it does work. Not on a Friday, but on Thursday. And you're going to be, yeah, but wait a minute. The next day was the Sabbath. Hold all those thoughts. We'll talk about that sometime. Okay. So was Jesus, he's in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights, as was Jonas. Well, what was he doing there? And was any of this prophesied about? And I'm going to tell you, I think it was prophesied. Let's look at that first. In Luke chapter 1, and it seems to me there was something else I was going to read in the in-between here. Let's see if I can find it real quick. It might not matter. Oh, yeah. Now, okay, I won't read it. I'll just tell you, you can read it. Go and read Luke 16, and it's verses 19 through 31. That's the story of Lazarus and the rich man. And in verses 25 and 26 of that story, there's also some details about the spirit world that we know, but that again most other Christian denominations don't know about it. But it's right there. It's plain, right there in the Bible, just as we have had it in the Doctrine and Covenants as well. Okay, now in Luke chapter 1, and this is about John the Baptist. And his father, John the Baptist's father, Zacharias, he was struck dumb. And so they come to circumcise John. And they are going to name him Zacharias after his father. And Elizabeth's like, nope, his name's going to be John. And they're like, what? No, you don't have anybody named John in your family. And Zacharias writes, no, his name is John. And all of a sudden his tongue is loosed. And then he begins to prophesy. And it's really cool. Like verse 68 is when he starts to prophesy. And he prophesies about John, and he prophesies about Christ. And he says, starting about verse 76, "And thou, child," speaking to his son John, "shalt be called the prophet of the highest, for thou shalt go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation unto his people by the remission of their sins." These are the people he will be preaching to. "Through the tender mercy of our God, whereby the dayspring from on high hath visited us." So the Messiah has come to, is made flesh and came to earth, and in the person of Jesus Christ. And then verse 79. So he's to give knowledge of salvation to people, to give light to them that sit in darkness. And you could say, okay, that's people here on earth that don't have knowledge of the plan of salvation, of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But then it goes on, it says, "Give light to them that sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace." Well, in the shadow of death there, so the interesting thing is that word death comes from the Greek word, I'm going to say it wrong, but I'm going to try, thanatos. And thanatos, if I'm correct, is an adjective used as a noun here. So it's used to describe the death of the body, but with the implication that this is somebody who is going to be going to hell, or to Sheol, but to the prison part of Sheol. And you can the information I've got here comes from Thayer's. So if you need a reference to look it up, just go look in Thayer's Thanatos. So it's the idea of that this person who has died will be living in hell or in the netherworld, in this prison part, which was believed to be very dark. So I believe that this is a prophecy that Christ would be going to those who were held in spirit prison. And we can read about that. So Jesus was in fact crucified. His body was placed in a tomb. He was there 3 days and 3 nights. And in 1 Peter, we have a description of what Christ was doing. For Christ, 1 Peter 3, verses 18 and 19. Well, 18, 19, and 20. "For Christ hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit." So he died, but his spirit was still alive, "by which also," meaning his living spirit, "by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison." Which spirits? Well, those, according in verse 20, "which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water." So many of the people then who died in the flood needed an opportunity to hear the gospel. And he went and preached to those people. Now, I've heard some people tell me, some from other Christian denominations say, that's not what that means. That means he sent people to go preach to prisoners. And they were told to go take care of prisoners, and indeed they were. But it says specifically here who the people were in this prison, those who were disobedient, those who died in the flood. And we can back this up in Ephesians 4 verse 9. And this is talking about Christ here in Ephesians. Because it just is mentioned how he had ascended. Now that he ascended, what is it Okay, he ascended after he was resurrected. Remember. Okay, so before he was resurrected, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? And the lower parts of the earth is where the Hebrews believed that this that Sheol was. So when we read the description in Jonah, how he went down to the bottoms of the mountains, and the earth with her bars was shut behind him. The earth closed her bars behind him. He was shut up in this prison in the earth. Okay, just a bit of a description there of where Jesus went when he descended. And he went to Sheol, and he preached as it was prophesied by Zacharias in fulfillment of the sign of Jonas being in the heart of the earth, his body being in the earth, or you could say his spirit being in the heart of the earth, being in the lower parts for 3 days and 3 nights, as Jonah was in Sheol for 3 days and 3 nights. Yeah, I love finding these kind of correlations. So Jesus went there and preached, and then of course had everybody organized and this great missionary effort after Jesus' death and resurrection, where the gospel went, all over the world. And we have Alma preaching after his 3 days and 3 nights. We have Jonah preaching, although somewhat reluctantly, after his 3 days and 3 nights. I find all this just really fascinating. What did you find in your reading in Alma? I think it's 36 through 38. I hope that's right. What did you find interesting? Man, leave me a message. Let me know what you found. Man, give me something, because I'm just one person. Put me in a room with even just 2 other people. The chances of 2 other people learning way more than me is pretty good. So, man, let's just all teach each other. Let me know what you found out. All right, okay, I'm rambling. Let's just wrap it up. I love y'all. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me ramble. And I will see you the next time.